This is breaking news from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, sponsored by Michael Gaughan's South Point Hotel, Casino, and Spa.
Thank you for joining us for this breaking news update. I'm Renee Summerhour with the Las Vegas Review-Journal. We are just moments away, I should say, from a briefing at Metro Police Headquarters in Las Vegas, in which Sheriff Joe Lombardo will provide an update on the homicide investigation involving Review-Journal's Jeff Gehrman. Officials are expected to comment on the arrest of Clark County Public Administrator Robert Tellis. Tellis was arrested Wednesday on suspicion of murder in the fatal stabbing of Gehrman at his home over the weekend. Our team coverage of the story is hitting very close to home for a lot of us here at the Review-Journal. Dozens of reporters and photographers gathered at Tellis's home near Fort Apache in Charleston, where police were active throughout the entire day Wednesday. Police had interviewed Tellis and searched his home in the afternoon, and by 6 p.m., police had returned in a full tactical gear surrounding his house. Images captured by our team showed Tellis being wheeled out of his home on a stretcher and loaded into an ambulance. The exact details of his injuries have not yet been made public, but we are hoping that we will get those answers during the briefing shortly. His arrest comes less than a day after police asked the public's help in identifying a suspect in the death of Gehrman. On Tuesday afternoon, police released 2 pieces of surveillance footage to the public, one showing a suspect that you see there in a wide straw hat, gloves, and a bright orange long-sleeve shirt. The other shows a 2007 to 2014 red or maroon GMC Yukon Denali tied to the suspect. Tuesday night marked a shocking development in the investigation as Review-Journal reporters observed Tellis in the driveway of his home, standing next to the vehicle matching that description. Wednesday, that same car and another vehicle were towed from Tellis's driveway. We were there as Tellis arrived back home around 2:20 p.m. after police questioning, where he was pressed for comment in his involvement in the investigation.
Can you comment?
This murder? Did you do this? Tell us anything?
Why did police tow away your vehicle?
Do you have a comment?
Tellis did not respond as he closed his garage door behind him while wearing what appeared to be a white hazmat suit. Wednesday's activities indicated for the first time that the killing might be related to Gehrman's work exposing public wrongdoing. Gehrman spent months reporting on the turmoil surrounding Tellis's oversight of the public administrator's office. Multiple reports from Gehrman's findings beginning in May led to Tellis losing his Democratic re-election bid in the primary. Gehrman also recently filed public records requests for emails and text messages between Tellis and 3 other county officials involving Roberta Lee Kennett. She was previously identified as a subordinate staffer allegedly involved in a, quote, inappropriate relationship with Tellis. Tellis posted a scathing letter on his election website in June, the letter attacking the Review-Journal and its reporting. It claimed the allegations against him were false and leveled what some employees said was a threat to retaliate against them and stepping forward. They told Gehrman they feared for their jobs and reported concerns about the letter to county human resources. Tellis also posted his frustration on Twitter on multiple occasions. On June 16th, he even went as far as to say Gehrman was obsessed with him. Later in the month, he called him a bully for his reporting. Gehrman was on vacation during the time of his murder. He was found dead outside of his home in northwest Las Vegas on Saturday morning. Police say they believe he was fatally stabbed during an altercation that previous morning. Private services were held for Gehrman Wednesday. He was 69 years old. Review-Journal's executive editor Glenn Cook speaks out on the death of our beloved member of our team, saying, quote, "The arrest of Robert Tellis is once an enormous relief and an outrage for the Review-Journal newsroom. We are relieved Tellis is in custody and outraged that a colleague appeared to have been killed for reporting on an elected official. Journalists can't do their job, the important work our community require, if they are afraid to present these facts that could lead to violent retaliation." We thank the Las Vegas police for their urgency and their hard work, and for immediately recognizing the terrible significance of Jeff's killing. Now, hopefully the Review-Journal and the Gehrman family and Jeff's many friends can begin the process of mourning and honoring a great man and a brave reporter. Now, we know right now that the sheriff is running late. As you can see, we are live there at the headquarters as we begin to stream live from there. We are hoping to get as much as we can as far as any details that we all had witnessed yesterday. If you were following us on social media, via our YouTube, this video shown right here at about 2:20 p.m. as police officers knocked on the door of Tellis's home. He did not answer the door, and so that meant that they needed extra police presence there, including a SWAT team, fire trucks, and an ambulance. As you were following our coverage of that yesterday, a lot of our media was pushed back to create a large perimeter so that way they could get to Tellis if in fact he was inside. And as you can see there, he was taken out in custody, but in an ambulance stretcher. Tellis was arrested Wednesday on suspicion of murder in the fatal stabbing of Gehrman at his home over the weekend. Our team coverage of the story hitting close to home for a lot of us here at the Review-Journal. Dozens of reporters and photographers gathered at Tellis's home near Fort Apache and Charleston, where police were active throughout the day Wednesday. Police had interviewed Tellis and searched his home in the afternoon, and by 6 p.m., police had returned in full tactical gear surrounding his house. Images captured by our team showed Tellis being wheeled out of his home in a stretcher and loaded into an ambulance. The exact details of his injuries have not yet been made public, but we are hoping to get those answers during the briefing shortly. His arrest comes less than a day after police asked the public for help in identifying a suspect in the death of Gehrman. As you can see here, on Tuesday afternoon, police released 2 pieces of surveillance footage to the public, one showing a suspect in a wide straw hat, gloves, and a bright orange long-sleeve shirt. The other shows a 2007 to 2014 red or maroon GMC Yukon Denali tied to the suspect. Tuesday night marked the shocking development in the investigation as Review-Journal reporters observed Tellis in his driveway of his home, standing next to the vehicle matching that very description. Wednesday, that same car and another vehicle were towed from Tellis's driveway. Now, as we wait for this press conference to begin, we are joined now by one of our other Review-Journal investigative reporters, Brianna Erickson. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been extremely hard on the team as we are covering this story day after day. But you, alongside Jeff, were covering so many things, and you were very aware of what Jeff was covering at the time and how county employees are reacting to all of this. So tell us a little bit about what he was trying to uncover, what he did uncover, and how the county employees are reacting.
Yeah, Jeff had exposed months of tumultuous workplace hostility. He covered all the complaints that some of the workers had alleged and how Mr. Tellis allegedly retaliated against them and made them feel uncomfortable and unsafe in their work environment. Yesterday, before he was arrested, employees had told me that they were looking over their shoulder, that they felt uneasy, and after the arrest, they were relieved, but they were also very horrified.
Yeah, I bet. Now.
So how we'll orchestrate this is I will do the introduction, and Captain Dory Korn will come up after me to provide the details associated with the incident, and then subsequently we'll be available for some Q&A under the direction of Jamie Oos, who is the PIO. Okay, Jamie, you good to go? All right, good morning, everyone. I'm obviously Sheriff Joesph Lombardo. I'm here to brief you on the latest details in the homicide of review journalist, investigative reporter Jeff Gehrman. First and foremost, I want to offer my condolences to the Jeff's family, friends, and co-workers at the Review Journal. I want to thank our partners in the community who have helped us share crucial details with the public over the last few days. From the moment LVMPD detectives were called to the scene on Saturday morning, investigators have been working tirelessly to identify the suspect and effect an arrest. Under my direction, we enacted major case protocol Saturday to bring together the full force of LVMPD to solve this homicide. Major case protocol was first utilized in 2018. The goal is to bring together resources to maximize the investigative effort and ensure timely, clear, and consistent communication during a high-profile investigation. Additionally, large amounts of incoming information would need to be processed timely and with diligence. This has been an unusual case from the beginning. The murder of an investigative journalist and the main suspect, an elected official here in Clark County. Because of the relentless follow-up of our detectives and with your help, I'm here to announce the arrest of 45-year-old Robert Tellis. He was booked in the Clark County Detention Center last night on the charge of open murder. This is a terrible and jarring homicide, one that has deeply impacted Las Vegas. Every murder is tragic, but the killing of a journalist is particularly troublesome. We hope the arrest of Tellis and his subsequent prosecution will ultimately provide a sense of justice for our community and Mr. Gehrman's family. And I would like to add, our work is done in this case. Detectives are still shifting through information. So in other words, the case is still continuing. We have several leads we're still following up on to solidify the case and to put to bed other allegations. So at this point, I'd like to bring Dory Korn, captain of the Homicide Bureau, forward, and he will walk you through the timeline associated with the case. Thank you.
Good morning. As you know, we began our homicide investigation about 5 days ago on Saturday, September 3rd. This was after we received a 911 call of an unresponsive male that was found on the side of his home. Our preliminary investigation revealed that the unresponsive male was deceased as a result of stabbings. We also determined pretty quickly that the victim was Jeff Gehrman, as the sheriff said. Jeff Gehrman is a well-known investigative reporter, and that was taken into account immediately. Some of the other things that were developed pretty quickly by our homicide investigation was that the suspect, as you see here in the photo to my left, your right, was wearing an orange shirt with reflective stripes, a straw hat, and was carrying a duffel bag, and what was likely an attempt to either disguise his identity or conceal his identity. We also know that the suspect was walking westbound, approaching Gehrman's home on Friday, September 2nd, the day prior to us being notified. On that morning, he approached Mr. Gehrman's home and went to the side of the house. Shortly after, Gehrman came outside of the garage door and then went to the side of the house, and ultimately an altercation took place between the suspect and the victim. We believe this happened around 11 8:18 a.m., and at that time, our victim was stabbed multiple times. As Sheriff Lombardo pointed out, he initiated major case protocol immediately based on the circumstances, which allowed us to bring in a lot more resources to address a lot of the tips and leads and information coming in from the public. Our detectives and everyone involved in this case have been working nonstop since Saturday. This is a very important case for everyone involved. And on day 2 of our major case protocol, we developed a very critical lead, which was a vehicle that we identified. It was a maroon-colored GMC Denali that was suspiciously driving around in the neighborhood on the morning of the murder, prior to the murder, and then certainly was there at the time when the murder happened. That vehicle had stopped multiple times throughout the neighborhood and was behaving suspiciously, or was suspicious. The second key piece on day 2 was we determined that the suspect wearing the orange shirt had fled in that vehicle, which connected the vehicle to the suspect. As I mentioned before in our earlier statements, we've been working all possible leads on this case. We've been exploring all theories and conducting simultaneous investigations into every piece of information we came across. There were 2 main areas that we were focused on early on. One was ensuring that this was not connected to a burglary series or anything of the sort. And then 2, looking at any work-related grievances or conflicts related to Mr. Gehrman's work. We knew that as investigative reporter, he had written several articles, and there were different allegations and statements about potential people that would be upset about it. One in particular that we identified early on was Robert Tellis as a person of interest, because Tellis was upset about articles that were being written by Gehrman as an investigative journalist that exposed potential wrongdoing, and Tellis had publicly expressed his issues with that reporting, and then ultimately Tellis was also upset, from what we found out later, that there was additional reporting that was pending. So at that time, we began focusing a little bit more on that as we conducted all of our investigative efforts. The other thing that was discovered by our detectives was there was a vehicle that matched the suspect's vehicle description, that maroon GMC Denali that was parked in front of Tellis's home. It was registered to his wife. And then we ultimately developed video evidence that showed that that vehicle, the GMC Denali parked in front of Tellis's home, had departed around 9 a.m. in the morning on the day of the murder and returned around 12 p.m. just after the murder, which matched our timeline. We immediately began working on search warrants, and then we began searching. We executed those search warrants early yesterday morning, and that involved searching Tellis's home, his vehicles, and then also searching his body to collect a DNA sample to compare it to DNA recovered during the crime. At that time, as you noticed yesterday, we were still building our case, continuing our investigation, and we were waiting on DNA results, and so Tellis was released as we continued to build our case. Detectives continue to work very aggressively. As the sheriff pointed out, we've built a culture around here where we expect relentless follow-up on every case we're involved in, so they were relentless in their efforts. We worked as quickly as possible, and shortly after, we developed information that indicated Tellis was driving the GMC Denali the morning of the murder. We also, through the search warrant effort, we recovered a pair of shoes, as you'll see here on my screen here to the left, that matched the suspect's description. Also, as you can see, there's apparent blood on the shoes, and the shoes were cut, likely in a manner to try to destroy evidence. In addition to the shoes, we recovered a straw hat that was also cut in a manner that was likely to destroy the evidence. And that straw hat, as you can see, matches the one in the photo. Just something to point out, that black brim is actually the interior part of the hat, a sweatband, not the exterior part. But we analyzed the hat, analyzed the shoes, and then ultimately, one of the most important aspects of this investigation was waiting on the DNA results, and we received positive DNA results that showed Robert Tellis's DNA at the crime scene. At that time, we immediately initiated our arrest operation and planning. The goal was to take Tellis into custody as safely as possible. And thanks to the men and women of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and the leadership here, we were able to successfully execute that operation yesterday, and Tellis was taken into custody safely and arrested, as the sheriff talked about. I'll just quickly conclude my part by saying thank you to the homicide unit in particular. We are very fortunate in Las Vegas. We have the best homicide unit in the country with the highest solvability rate in the country, and they work tirelessly, as the sheriff pointed out, to succeed in this case. And then there were a lot of supporting units from the lab, technicians, to our tactical teams, and everyone else involved that did a tremendous job, as well as the media. All of you really helped us when we asked for the help to get information out. You did that job for us and helped us, and the general public who provided tips and leads. So definitely appreciated. And with that, as I just reiterate, it's very important. We're only 5 days into this case. So there is still a lot of effort, as the sheriff pointed out, that needs to be conducted. And there will be more facts as we continue to make progress on this case. But we do believe this is an important case, and that's why everyone involved, from the very top of our agency, as the sheriff, to the lower parts working every single lead, took this case very seriously, because they know the impact it has on our community and our country as a whole. With that, we'll turn it over to questions, and depending on the questions, the sheriff or I will answer. Yes, sir.
Sounds like you were onto him fairly early, at least as a potential suspect. So once he was aware that you were onto him, how would you describe his demeanor, his level of cooperation?
So there's some details in the investigation we can't reveal at this time because we want to make sure we have a successful prosecution. But I can tell you that early on, we were conducting simultaneous investigations into various leads, some related to Tellus, some related to burglaries and everything else. So can't speak to demeanor at this time, but it was successful in terms of focusing on him.
And is this video that we're showing right there, is that him walking to what you believe was the eventual homicide?
That is video of the suspect walking to the homicide, and video to or from the homicide. We have video on both angles that we've shared with the public since, and it is a casual walk even after the homicide. Yes, sir, Gray.
Cap, I'm going to ask a quick one and then another one. Did you find the orange outfit?
So at this time, we're still finishing our investigative effort. We found the straw hat and the shoes. We're still processing other evidence that was recovered from the home.
The garage door remained open, correct?
We know that our victim exited through the garage door. I don't have the details on whether it was open at the time of our response, but we do have it documented.
Was anything taken from the home or from Mr. Garman?
At this time, we do not believe that anything was taken from the home or from Mr. Garman. Yes, sir.
Sir, can you address, has he been cooperative during the interview with law enforcement? And can you also address the circumstances of him being brought out in a stretcher after the arrest?
So to your first question, we can't answer details at this time regarding anything regarding our interaction with the suspect, but I can tell you the footage you saw him coming out on the stretcher, he had self-inflicted wounds, and we were trying to provide medical attention to help him. Yes, ma'am.
Describe the wounds?
At this time, I cannot describe the wounds, but we do know that they were non-life-threatening. Yes, ma'am.
Can you describe the situation of Tellus being brought back home only to be arrested a few short hours later? And did the district attorney have any influence on why he was not arrested at that time?
So in the last press conference, one of the things I said was that it was not just important enough for us to identify and apprehend the suspect, but we wanted to do it in a way where we could have a solid, good prosecution. So in consultation with the district attorney's office throughout this investigation, and certainly at the time of determining release to continue to build our case. So yes.
Do you believe any of we know the motive of the past stories, but do you believe there's any motive to potential new stories he is working on the suspect?
Right now, we can't speculate on the motive beyond what was already discussed. We know that Tellus was very upset about Garman's reporting already about his role as a public administrator and everything else that followed with that. Yes, sir.
So he was brought back to the home. We saw him go back in the hazmat suit, presumably because his clothes were taken. And then we sort of saw SWAT come in. He was uncooperative coming out. Is there going to be any look at the fact that an entire neighborhood was evacuated for a suspect with a, you were onto him, I understand you were waiting for that DNA, but that 2-hour window could have been very different. So is there going to be any look at not releasing a potential murder suspect back to his home like that?
You know, there's a reason why people from all across the United States come to Las Vegas to apply with our agency to become police officers and detectives and SWAT officers and all that, and it's because we have a very professional and effective way of how we safely take people into custody in these types of very dynamic situations, and that was proven yesterday. And then the second reason is we have a community that's very supportive. So I understand some people might be frustrated with the disruption, but the way the operation worked, the community was supportive of how we did it, and they were certainly supportive of the outcome because everyone is safe today.
Right. We certainly support you, but he was able to go into that home, and sources say he inflicted self-harm on himself. Obviously, he was taken to the hospital. So something could have happened in that 2-hour window. So I think we're all a little curious, why was that decision not made when he just walked back into the house?
Yeah, just as I answered.
That's not something we usually
Sure, understood. As I answered before, we wanted to provide a medical attention, which we were successful in doing so, and then we also wanted to make sure that we were consulting with our district attorney's office and ensuring a solid case to keep building the evidence, and that's what we did successfully. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. At this time, as the sheriff pointed out, this is 5 days into the investigation. We had a lot of success early on because the sheriff enacted major case protocol, but there is still a lot of information to go through. We gave the information that we arrested the person for the murder, but we'll still go through everything and be able to analyze that a little bit further. Yes, ma'am.
Sheriff, you said the murder of a journalist is especially troubling. Now is probably not the appropriate time to talk politics, but do you condemn?
So why are we talking politics then? No, I think this is probably the inappropriate venue to speculate on that or opine on that. I think it needs to be stated and noted that it is troublesome because it is a journalist, and we expect journalism to be open and transparent and a watchdog for government. And when people take it upon themselves to create harm associated with that profession, I think it's very important that we put all eyes on and address the case appropriately, such as we did in this case with this expediency associated with it. But let me provide some clarification on the question on the individual returning to the house. So that's dictated by the Constitution and the NRS, and the ability for an individual to leave on their free will until we obtained enough evidence to rise to probable cause to effect an arrest. And that was the reason why that took place at that time.
Sheriff, also, did you have any personal involvement in the case beyond the special protocols that you initiated?
No, ma'am, no, I did not.
Can you explain, so after you had left the search warrant and then the one officer came back by himself, why did he come back by himself? What was his intent at that point? Was he planning to arrest the suspect at that point, or why was he there by himself?
I'm not familiar with that. Yeah.
Just very briefly, so we wanted to make sure we maintained open communication with Mr. Tellis. We wanted to make sure we had a safe resolution of this. So it was our strategy to make sure we were overt and provided any channels of communication to continue as we continue to build our case.
But was it safe to have just one person there? Because a short time after that, you brought everybody in SWAT and armed.
Well, I think it's an assumption.
We don't publicly talk about our tactics, and I assure you there was more than one person there.
Sheriff, can you talk about the actual weapon that was used in the stabbing? Was that recovered, and what was that weapon?
At this point, we have not recovered it. We continue to search for that, and that's why Captain Corin has alluded that we're continuing the investigation. We're still in short proximity to this, and obviously you know all the legwork continues for the police agency and investigative functions on a case this complicated. And we have to ensure that we're dotting the I's and crossing the T's to ensure a successful prosecution.
Was Mr. Tellis interviewed? Did he give a statement, and/or was he represented by an attorney at that time?
He was interviewed. He was consensually interviewed, voluntarily interviewed. He had the opportunity to obtain an attorney. He chose not to, and subsequent termination of the interview, he was let go at that time.
Can you talk about the Las Vegas Review-Journal involvement in this case?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up because they were instrumental in notifying us of the next of kin for Mr. Gehrman so that we could do those appropriate notifications of the family members before we made this public. And secondly, they were instrumental in providing us for information on his cases that he was working previously and currently that may lead to some leads associated with this case. And Captain Corin alluded to other directions we were pursuing because we didn't know absolutely at this point if Tellis was the involved suspect. We had to look at different crimes committed in the neighborhood. We had to pursue every aspect. And the Review Journal provided us some additional information on a previous case that we had worked and made public in the information in the public space as to MO, dress, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that. And we had to run that to bed as a result of the RJ, I'll use the RJ, bringing it forward.
Is Tellus still hospitalized?
I don't know.
He's currently, or he's at Clark County Detention Center.
Was the FBI used because of his position as being an elected official?
I'm sorry?
Was the FBI used at all for his arrest because he was a public official?
No, we didn't feel the need to bring the FBI in as of yet. If it had gone across state line or rise to a different level of electronic evaluation, we'd have very well much brought in the FBI. I'll answer one more question.
You have remarkable video of the man you identified as the suspect approaching the attack scene. Do you have video of the attack?
We have some distorted video associated with the attack, and we are in the process of clarifying that video as we speak. So,
Captain, when did Tellus actually become a suspect, your prime suspect in this case? And when you came, I assume you didn't know when you had the press conference and you were asking for help, but when you had that press conference a couple days ago, was he already on your radar?
So
this will be the last question.
part of major case protocol is to look at all leads at the same time. So we had a lot of personnel investigating very early on. Tellus is a person of interest. The exact time of when it becomes a primary suspect or secondary suspect is really irrelevant because when we overfocus on one area, we start losing evidence and losing other things. So the reality is, very early on into the major case protocol, we were doing a lot of things simultaneously, and that's what gave us the success here. But I'm sorry, unfortunately, we got to wrap it up, but we will have more information come out soon. We have a lot more facts on this case, so just give us some time. It's only been 5 days. Thank you, though. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. We will not.
Okay, so as you just heard, Sheriff Joe Lombardo and Dory Corinne giving us more details on the investigation and what led up to the arrest of Robert Tellus. And as I'm sitting here again with Brianna, we were talking about the beginning of the investigation when they showed the suspect walking down the street and they showed the maroon car. What led other investigative journalists here at the Review Journal to say, we might know that vehicle?
Well, we had, seen texts or the tweets that Tellus had been publicly tagging Jeff Gehrman in, calling him a bully and saying he was obsessed with him, that he was preparing lying smear piece number 4. So other reporters in the newsroom had just typed in Tellus's address and saw the picture on Google Maps of a similar car, and that was just after the press conference, and reporters went over there just very quickly to see if the car was still in the driveway, and that's where we got the photo from Tuesday.
Yes, which appeared to look like as if he was washing the car or getting out or just being around the car in the driveway. And again, when we were there live to see the officers there, obviously we saw, if everyone didn't see that vehicle and immediately put 2 and 2 together, to obviously speculate that that could in fact have been the vehicle that was in the surveillance video that was given to the public. Now, just a couple things, just so that we're aware of what happened. Robert Tellus was booked into Clark County Detention Center. He is being charged with 1 count of open murder. And again, they described what led up during their investigation. They knew that the suspect was seen walking westbound on Friday at around 11:18. That was the video, again, that was released to the public that we all saw with the straw hat and the bright orange shirt. Detectives found, again, just as our amazing investigative reporters found, the amount of grievances that Robert Tellus was airing out on Twitter about the recent reporting of his office and the wrongdoings happening there. And immediately that kind of kickstarted their investigation as a starting point, other than the videos that were released to the public. They did in fact get the search warrant, which we were there all yesterday as we watched officers seize both vehicles. One was the Yukon, the other one was, it looked like a brown Mercedes of some kind. And then DNA samples, which is a new finding for us today about what DNA they collected. They found blood on the pair of shoes that they believed to be were Tellis's. They also saw a straw hat that believed to be cut up. They also said the shoes were cut up. They believe, detectives believe that was in an effort to conceal evidence. And they're saying that they did in fact find positive DNA at the crime scene linking Tellis to the crime. They did arrest him, as we saw some of the amazing pictures by our photojournalist, that Robert Tellis was arrested, but he was taken into a stretcher, into an ambulance with self-inflicted wounds. Investigators are not telling us how those wounds got there or how they were inflicted. We hope that those details will then come out. They also talked about, what a lot of people were wondering, was about the fact that he was gone from the home. He was being questioned by investigators, and then he was allowed to go home. Have you seen this before? I mean, obviously they're saying that they allow suspects to return free will, but that certain pieces of evidence just needed to be clarified before they could make the arrest.
Yeah, it sounds like Lombardo said he, just had to go by the law in that case and wait for the official connection, just so that they could build the strongest case possible.
Yeah. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, we were talking about some of the stories that Jeff had been working on, and the one that you are currently working on, just about the environment for the Tellis office and their employees, saying that a lot of them were fearing for their safety. Tell us a little bit about that and the continued story you're working on with the wrongdoings going on at the administrators.
Yeah, it sounded to me like the employees were very shaken up yesterday. They said, they'd seen him get angry and just that they were totally shocked, by the news of his arrest, that someone in the office who they had conflict with could be capable of something like this. One of them shared some text messages that Tellis had sent her recently that showed that he was still festering about some of the stories that came out.
Mm-hmm. And again, are there any other information that you all are finding out just in regards to the reporting that ultimately, led to such a terrible event?
Well, he lost the primary after Jeff's stories, which I'm hearing was a devastating for his he texted a employee saying that she ruined his life's path. Mm-hmm. So it seemed like he really felt like that was the case there. Mm-hmm. And Jeff had outstanding records requests related to Tellis that he was looking into. And we certainly plan to finish what he started.
Yeah, and all of us here at the Review-Journal definitely continue to plan to remember Jeff for his tenacity and his amazing investigative reporting. And Brianna, I know this has been really hard on all of you in the investigation team, but I want to thank you for joining us today and answering some of these questions we have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, while we continue to follow this story and its development, we also want to take a moment to recognize the work of Gehrman's journalism career that spans 40 years in Las Vegas, his work leading to important reforms and policy changes.
Political investigations, jewelry heists, and organized crime, all news categories that fell beneath the byline of longtime Las Vegas reporter Jeff Gehrman. Remembered for his tenacity as a hard news reporter that was dedicated to the craft of journalism. In 1997, Gehrman worked as a reporter for the Las Vegas Sun, being one of the first reporters to break the story of the killing of Las Vegas Mafia associate Herbert Fat Herbie Blitzstein. In 2010, Gehrman joined the Las Vegas Review-Journal after more than 2 decades at the Las Vegas Sun. In 2017, Gehrman and other members of the Las Vegas Review-Journal's investigative team conducted a year-long investigation of the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, finding details of lavish purchases and first-class trips overseas for elected officials who served on the agency's board. In the same year, Las Vegas suffered the worst mass shooting in modern American history. Gehrman reported several days later on how the shooter had not only fired at the crowd at the Route 91 festival, but also at 2 nearby fuel tanks.
Las Vegas was considered an open city for the mafia.
And as a writer and host, Gehrman brought an important voice to the Review Journal's true crime podcast, Mobbed Up. Tributes came from all across the state of Nevada. Governor Steve Sisolak called Gehrman's death a tragic loss for our community, adding Gehrman was tough but fair. Gehrman was 69 years old.